The morning sun painted the sky in soft pink and orange colors as Sarah Martinez stepped out of her small wooden cabin. She pulled her warm jacket closer around her body and breathed in the fresh mountain air. This was her favorite time of day. Before the world woke up, before her phone started ringing with work calls, before the busy day began at the hospital where she worked as a nurse. Sarah had lived in this little cabin for 3 years now. Her grandmother had left it to her when she died, and Sarah loved everything about it. The cabin was old and simple, with just 2 bedrooms, a small kitchen, and a cozy living room with a stone fireplace. It sat at the edge of thick woods, far from the noise and rush of the city. Here Sarah could think clearly and find peace after her long, hard days taking care of sick people. Every morning, she walked the same path through the woods. The trail was narrow and winding, covered with fallen leaves that made soft sounds under her feet. Tall pine trees reached up to the sky on both sides, and small birds sang their morning songs from the branches. Sarah knew every rock, every bend in the path, every tree along the way. These woods felt like home to her. Money was always tight for Sarah. Her job at the small-town hospital didn't pay much, and keeping up the old cabin was expensive. The roof leaked when it rained hard, the heating system made strange noises, and something always seemed to need fixing. But Sarah never complained. She had everything she needed: a roof over her head, food on her table, and this beautiful place to call home. As she walked deeper into the woods that Tuesday morning, Sarah thought about her day ahead. She had to work a double shift at the hospital because another nurse had called in sick. It would be a long, tiring day, but she didn't mind. Helping people was what she loved most about her job. Even when she was exhausted, seeing a patient get better made everything worth it. The morning mist hung low between the trees, making everything look soft and magical. Sarah loved how quiet it was here. No cars honking, no people shouting, no city sounds, just the wind in the trees, the birds singing, and her own footsteps on the forest floor. She walked slowly, enjoying every moment of peace before her busy day began. But this morning was different. As Sarah rounded a familiar bend in the trail, she heard something that made her stop. It was a low sound, like someone in pain. She stood very still and listened carefully. There it was again, a soft groan coming from somewhere nearby. Sarah's heart started beating faster. In all her years of walking these woods, she had never heard anything like this. Wild animals lived here, but this didn't sound like any animal she knew. It sounded human. Someone was hurt. Following the sound, Sarah left the main trail and pushed through some thick bushes. Branches caught at her jacket and leaves brushed against her face. She moved carefully, listening for the sound again. Then she saw him. Behind a pile of fallen logs, a man lay on the ground. He was unconscious, his body twisted in an awkward position. Sarah's nursing training kicked in immediately. She dropped to her knees beside him and quickly looked him over. Blood covered the left side of his face from a deep cut on his forehead. His left arm was bent at a strange angle, clearly broken. His breathing was shallow, and his skin was pale and cold. The man looked to be in his early 30s. He had dark brown hair that was now matted with blood and dirt. He wore blue jeans, a red and black checked flannel shirt that was torn in several places, and brown cowboy boots that had seen better days. Despite being dirty and injured, something about him seemed different. His clothes looked expensive, even though they were torn and muddy. His hands were clean and soft, not rough like someone who worked hard with them every day. Sarah checked his pulse. It was weak but steady. She gently touched his forehead. He had a fever. This man needed help fast or he might die. Sarah looked around, trying to figure out what had happened. There were no roads nearby, no houses, nothing to explain how he had gotten here. The nearest hiking trail was miles away. On his wrist was a watch that looked expensive, but the face was cracked and it had stopped working. In the pocket of his jeans, Sarah found a wallet, but when she opened it, there was no money and no identification. That was strange. Who carries an empty wallet? Sarah pulled out her cell phone to call for help. The screen showed only one bar, barely enough signal to make a call. She dialed 911 and waited nervously as it rang. 911, what's your emergency? The operator asked. I found an injured man in the woods, Sarah said quickly. He's unconscious and has a bad head injury and a broken arm. I think he might be in shock. The operator asked for her location, and Sarah gave the best description she could of where she was in the woods. I'm about 2 miles from Maple Road near the old Miller property. Ma'am, it's going to take us at least 45 minutes to get an ambulance to that location, the operator said. Can you stay with the patient until we arrive? Sarah looked down at the unconscious man. 45 minutes was a long time for someone this badly hurt. His breathing was getting weaker, and she could see that he was losing more blood from the head wound. In her experience as a nurse, she knew that head injuries could be very dangerous. Every minute counted. I don't think he can wait that long, Sarah told the operator. I'm a registered nurse. I'm going to move him to my cabin where I can take better care of him. The operator tried to talk her out of it, explaining that moving an injured person could make things worse. But Sarah had made up her mind. She knew the risks, but she also knew that leaving him here could mean death. Her cabin was only half a mile away, and she had medical supplies there. After hanging up, Sarah took off her jacket and carefully wrapped it around the man's upper body to keep him warm. She checked all around the area one more time, looking for any clues about what had happened to him. She found nothing. No bag, no horse, no signs of an accident. It was as if he had just appeared in her woods. Getting him to her cabin would not be easy. The man was much bigger than Sarah, probably 6 feet tall and well over 180 pounds. But Sarah was strong from years of lifting patients at the hospital, and she was determined. She managed to get him into a sitting position, then pulled his good arm around her shoulders. Step by step, Sarah half-carried, half-dragged the mysterious cowboy through the woods toward her cabin. Every few minutes, she had to stop and rest. The man groaned softly a few times but never woke up. Sarah talked to him as they moved, telling him he was going to be okay, that she was going to take care of him. When they finally reached her cabin, Sarah was exhausted and breathing hard. But there was no time to rest. She had work to do if she was going to save this stranger's life. Sarah quickly turned her small living room into a hospital room. She moved her coffee table to one side and spread clean blankets on the couch. Then she ran to her bedroom and grabbed her medical bag, the one she always kept ready for emergencies. Working at a small town hospital had taught her to be prepared for anything. First, she needed to stop the bleeding from his head. Sarah gently cleaned the wound with warm water and antiseptic. The cut was deep, but not as bad as it had looked. With all the blood, she carefully stitched it closed, just like she had learned in nursing school. Her hands moved steadily, even though her heart was beating fast. She had treated many patients before, but never in her own living room. The man's broken arm was her next concern. Sarah felt along the bone carefully. It was a clean break, which was good news. She found some wooden boards in her garage and used them to make a splint. Then she wrapped his arm tightly with bandages and put it in a sling made from an old bedsheet. It wasn't perfect, but it would keep the bone in place until he could see a real doctor. Throughout the afternoon, Sarah checked on him every few minutes. She took his temperature, listened to his heartbeat, and watched his breathing. Slowly, his color started to improve. The fever went down and his pulse got stronger. Sarah felt hopeful. This mysterious cowboy was going to live. As the sun was setting, the man finally opened his eyes. Sarah was sitting in a chair beside the couch, reading a book and keeping watch. When she saw his dark brown eyes looking at her, she felt a wave of relief wash over her. "Where am I?" he asked in a deep, rough voice. He tried to sit up but winced in pain and lay back down. "You're safe," Sarah said gently. "I found you in the woods this morning. You were hurt pretty badly. I'm Sarah, and I'm a nurse. How do you feel?" The man looked around her small cabin, taking in the stone fireplace, the simple furniture, and the medical supplies scattered on her coffee table. "I feel like I got kicked by a horse," he said with a weak smile. "Thank you for helping me. I'm Jake." "Just Jake?" Sarah asked. He was quiet for a moment, as if thinking about his answer. "Jake Miller," he said finally. "I work on ranches. moving from place to place. I don't remember much about what happened. There was a storm, and my horse got spooked. Next thing I knew, I was waking up here. Sarah studied his face. Something about his story didn't feel quite right, but she couldn't put her finger on what it was. Maybe it was the way he talked. His words were too educated, too polished for a simple ranch hand. Or maybe it was his hands, which looked too soft and clean for someone who worked with cattle all day. You have a concussion, Sarah explained. That's why you can't remember everything clearly. Memory problems are normal with head injuries. You also have a broken arm, but it should heal fine if you take care of it. Jake nodded and winced again. I don't want to go to a hospital, he said quickly. I can't afford it, and I heal fast. If you could just let me rest here for a day or two, I'll be on my way. Sarah looked at him with concern. You need proper medical care. Head injuries can be serious. What if something goes wrong? Please, Jake said, and there was something in his voice that made Sarah's heart skip. I trust you. You saved my life already. I can tell you're a good nurse. Against her better judgment, Sarah agreed to let him stay. Maybe it was the way he looked at her, or maybe it was because she was lonely in her little cabin. Either way, she found herself saying yes to this mysterious cowboy who had appeared in her woods like something from a dream. Over the next few days, Jake proved to be an easy patient. He slept a lot, which was good for healing. When he was awake, he was polite and grateful. He insisted on helping around the cabin, even with his broken arm. He washed dishes with his good hand, swept the floor, and even managed to fix her leaky kitchen faucet using tools from her garage. You don't have to do all this, Sarah told him one morning as she watched him organizing her bookshelf. I want to, Jake replied. You're taking care of me. It's the least I can do. He picked up one of her books, a novel about traveling to Paris. You like to read about faraway places? Sarah blushed. I've always wanted to travel, but I've never had the money. Books are the only way I can see the world. Jake looked at the book thoughtfully. Paris is beautiful in the spring, he said quietly. The flowers bloom along the river and the whole city smells like fresh bread and coffee. Sarah stared at him. You've been to Paris? Jake's eyes widened, as if he had said something wrong. I saw it in a movie once. It looked nice. But Sarah had heard the way he described it, with the detail of someone who had actually been there. This was the second time she had caught him saying things that didn't match his story about being a simple ranch worker. Despite her growing suspicions, Sarah found herself enjoying Jake's company more each day. In the evenings, they would sit by the fireplace and talk for hours. Jake told stories about life on different ranches, some funny, some sad, all entertaining. He was a good listener too, asking Sarah about her work at the hospital and her dreams for the future. I've always wanted to open a small clinic, Sarah admitted one night as they shared a simple dinner of soup and bread. Somewhere rural, where people can't easily get to big hospitals. There's such a need for basic medical care in places like this. Jake's eyes lit up with interest. That's a wonderful dream. You'd be amazing at running your own clinic. I can tell how much you care about helping people. It's just a dream, Sarah said sadly. I could never afford to start my own business. It takes a lot of money to buy equipment and rent a building. Dreams have a way of coming true when you least expect it, Jake said with a mysterious smile. The days passed. Sarah noticed more things about Jake that didn't add up. His watch was expensive even though it was broken. His boots were made of high-quality leather. He knew about wine and art and books in a way that seemed unusual for someone who spent his time with horses and cattle. Sometimes his phone would buzz, and he would quickly turn it off without looking at it. But there were other things Sarah noticed too. The way Jake's face relaxed when he laughed. How gentle he was when he helped her with small tasks around the cabin. The way he listened to her stories about difficult days at the hospital with real understanding and compassion. One evening, as they sat on her small porch watching the stars, Jake reached over and took her hand. His touch was warm and gentle, sending a shiver up Sarah's arm. Sarah, he said softly, I want you to know that these have been the best days I've had in years. You saved more than just my life. Sarah felt her heart racing. She was falling for this mysterious cowboy, even though she knew almost nothing about his real life. Every instinct told her that Jake was hiding something important, but when she looked into his eyes, all she saw was kindness and what looked like the beginning of love. "Jake," she whispered, but before she could say more, he leaned over and kissed her forehead gently. "Get some rest," he said. "Tomorrow I'll help you fix that loose board on your front steps." As Sarah lay in bed that night, she couldn't stop, thinking about Jake's touch and the way he had looked at her. She was falling in love with a man who might not be who he claimed to be. But for now, in the safety of her little cabin, none of that seemed to matter. By the end of Jake's first week at the cabin, his arm was healing well and the cut on his head had closed nicely. Sarah was amazed at how fast he recovered. Most people with injuries like his would still be in bed, but Jake seemed to get stronger every day. He moved around the cabin easily now, and the color had returned to his face. Sarah found herself looking forward to coming home from work each day. For the first time in years, her little cabin felt warm and alive. Jake always had dinner ready when she got home from her long shifts at the hospital. He cooked simple meals: soup, grilled cheese sandwiches, pasta with tomato sauce, but everything tasted better when shared with him. "You don't have to cook for me," Sarah told him one evening as she walked into the kitchen and smelled something delicious. "I like cooking," Jake said, stirring a pot of chicken stew. "Besides, you work hard all day taking care of other people. Someone should take care of you too." Sarah felt her heart flutter. No one had ever said anything like that to her before. She had always been the one taking care of everyone else: her patients, her elderly neighbors, even her friends who called when they had problems. Having someone want to take care of her felt strange and wonderful at the same time. After dinner, they developed a routine of sitting together on the small couch in front of the fireplace. Jake would build up the fire while Sarah made hot chocolate. Then they would talk for hours about everything and nothing. Jake was easy to talk to, and he seemed genuinely interested in Sarah's life and thoughts. "Tell me about your family," Sarah asked him one night as they watched the flames dance in the fireplace. Jake was quiet for a long moment. "There isn't much to tell," he said finally. "My parents died when I was young. I've been on my own for most of my life, moving from place to place, working different jobs." "That sounds lonely," Sarah said softly. "It was," Jake admitted, "until now." He looked at her with such intensity that Sarah felt her cheeks grow warm. But even as they grew closer, Sarah continued to notice things that didn't make sense. One morning, she came home early from work and found Jake on the phone in her backyard. He was speaking in a low, urgent voice about something involving contracts and board meetings. When he saw her, he quickly ended the call and claimed it was just a friend asking about work. Another time, Sarah noticed Jake reading a business magazine that she had never bought. When she asked where it came from, he said he had found it at the grocery store and thought it looked interesting. But the magazine was this month's issue and looked brand new, not like something someone had thrown away. The most puzzling thing happened when they were watching the news together. A story came on about a new hotel opening in the city, and Jake made a comment about the architecture being similar to buildings he had seen in Italy. Sarah asked when he had been to Italy, and Jake looked confused as if he couldn't believe he had said that. "I meant in pictures," he said quickly. "I saw pictures of Italian buildings in a book once," but Sarah had heard the way he talked about Italy with the familiarity of someone who had actually been there, just like when he had described Paris with such detail that first week. Despite these mysteries, Sarah's feelings for Jake grew stronger every day. He was kind, funny, and surprisingly gentle for someone who claimed to work with his hands all day. He fixed everything around her cabin that had been broken for months. He chopped wood for the fireplace with his good arm. He even started a small garden in her backyard, planting vegetables for the spring. "You're making this place feel like a real home," Sarah told him one Saturday morning as they worked together in the garden. Jake looked up from the tomato seeds he was planting. "It feels like home to me too," he said quietly. "More like home than anywhere I've ever been." Their first real kiss happened that same evening. They had spent the day working outside, and Sarah was tired but happy. As they sat on the porch steps, watching the sunset, Jake reached over and gently brushed a strand of hair from her face. "Sarah," he said softly, "these past few weeks with you have been the most real and honest time of my life." Before Sarah could ask what he meant by that, Jake leaned in and kissed her. It was soft and sweet at first, then deeper as Sarah kissed him back. When they finally pulled apart, Sarah felt like her whole world had changed. "I think I'm falling in love with you," Jake whispered against her ear. "I think I'm falling in love with you too," Sarah whispered back, even though part of her mind was screaming warnings about how little she really knew about this man. That night, they stayed up, talking until dawn. Jake told her about his dreams of settling down somewhere peaceful, of finding someone to build a life with. Sarah shared her deepest fears and hopes, including her worry that she wasn't interesting enough for someone like him. "Are you crazy?" Jake asked, pulling her closer on the couch. "You're the most interesting person I've ever met. You save people's lives every day. You live in this beautiful place surrounded by nature. You're kind and smart and beautiful. Any man would be lucky to have you in his life." Sarah felt tears in her eyes. She had never felt so cherished, so valued. But even as happiness filled her heart, doubt crept in too. Jake's words were so smooth, so perfect. Sometimes he sounded more like someone giving a speech than a simple cowboy talking to the woman he loved. The next morning, Sarah found Jake's phone on the kitchen counter while he was outside chopping wood. It had fallen behind the coffee maker, and she picked it up to give it back to him. The screen lit up, showing several missed calls from someone named Emma, and text messages about emergency board meeting and investors getting worried. Sarah stared at the phone, her heart pounding. Who was Emma? What board meetings? What investors? Ranch hands didn't have board meetings or investors. Sarah's hands shook as she put the phone back where she found it. When Jake came inside, Sarah acted normal, but her mind was racing. She wanted to ask him directly about the messages, but she was afraid of what she might learn. Part of her didn't want to know the truth if it meant losing the happiness she had found with him. That evening, as they sat by the fire, Sarah watched Jake's face in the flickering light. He looked peaceful and content, more relaxed than she had ever seen him. But now she wondered if this relaxed version of Jake was real, or if it was just another part of whatever game he was playing. "Jake," she said carefully, "tell me about your life before you came here. What were you really doing before the accident?" Jake's body tensed slightly, and Sarah saw a flash of something, fear, guilt, cross his face before he smiled. "You know my story," he said. "I was working on a ranch traveling through these mountains when my horse threw me." "But what ranch? Where exactly were you traveling to? You never give me specific details about anything." Jake was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. When he finally looked at her, Sarah saw conflict in his dark eyes, as if he was fighting some internal battle. "Sarah," he said slowly, "there are things about my past that are complicated. But I need you to know that everything I feel for you is real. Everything we have together is real." "What kind of complicated things?" Sarah pressed. But Jake just pulled her into his arms and held her tight. "Can we just have tonight?" he whispered. "Can we just be happy together without talking about the past?" Sarah wanted to push for answers, but the warmth of Jake's embrace and the sound of his heartbeat against her ear made her doubts seem less important. Whatever secrets he was keeping, she told herself, they couldn't change the good man she had come to know and love. But deep down, Sarah knew that secrets had a way of coming out, and when they did, everything might change. Sarah woke up on Thursday morning feeling happy and peaceful. Jake's arm was around her as they lay on the couch where they had fallen asleep talking the night before. She looked at his sleeping face and felt her heart fill with love. For the first time in her life, she felt completely content. The mysterious cowboy who had appeared in her woods had become everything to her. Jake stirred and opened his eyes, smiling when he saw her watching him. "Good morning, beautiful," he said, his voice rough with sleep. "Good morning," Sarah whispered back, kissing him softly. I have to go to town today to buy groceries. Do you need anything? Just you to come back safely, Jake said, pulling her closer. Sarah laughed and got up to get ready. She dressed quickly in jeans and a sweater, grabbed her purse and car keys and headed out. The drive to town usually took 30 minutes through winding mountain roads, and Sarah enjoyed the peaceful scenery. She felt like she was floating on air, humming love songs on the radio and thinking about Jake waiting for her at home. The grocery store was busy for a Thursday morning. Sarah picked up milk, bread, vegetables, and Jake's favorite coffee. She was standing in the checkout line when she heard two women behind her talking excitedly. I can't believe he's still missing, the first woman said. It's been 3 weeks now. His poor family must be going crazy, the second woman replied. He's so young and successful. I hope nothing terrible happened to him. Sarah wasn't really listening until she heard the first woman say, Did you see his picture on the front page of today's paper? He's very handsome. Someone must have seen him somewhere. Curious, Sarah looked toward the newspaper stand near the checkout counter. What she saw made her blood run cold. On the front page was a large photograph of Jake, her Jake, but the headline read, Millionaire Jake Harrison still missing after mountain hiking accident. Sarah's hands began to shake. She grabbed a newspaper and stared at the photo. It was definitely Jake, though in the picture he was wearing an expensive suit and standing in front of a tall office building. The article said he was the CEO of Harrison Industries, a company that owned hotels and restaurants across the country. His family was offering a $50,000 reward for any information about his whereabouts. The checkout clerk asked Sarah if she was okay because her face had gone completely white. Sarah mumbled something about feeling sick and quickly paid for her groceries. She sat in her car in the parking lot, reading the article over and over again. Jake Harrison, not Jake Miller as he had told her. CEO of a multi-million-dollar company, not a ranch hand who moved from place to place. The article said he had gone hiking alone in the mountains 3 weeks ago and never returned. His car had been found at a trailhead about 20 miles from Sarah's cabin. The family feared he might be dead. Sarah's mind raced as she remembered everything Jake had told her about himself. Every story about working on ranches, every claim about being poor and alone. All lies. The expensive watch, the soft hands, his knowledge about Paris and Italy, the business magazines, the phone calls about board meetings. It all made sense now. The drive home felt like the longest 30 minutes of Sarah's life. She gripped the steering wheel tightly, her emotions swinging between anger, hurt, and confusion. How could Jake have lied to her about everything? Why would a millionaire pretend to be a simple cowboy? Was anything between them real, or was she just part of some sick game? When Sarah pulled into her driveway, she saw Jake through the kitchen window, washing dishes like he did every day. He looked so normal, so innocent, that for a moment she almost convinced herself the newspaper was wrong. But when she looked at the photo again, there was no doubt. The man she loved was living a complete lie. Sarah walked into the cabin, her hands trembling as she held the newspaper behind her back. Jake smiled when he saw her, the same warm, loving smile that had been melting her heart for weeks. You're back early, he said, drying his hands on a dish towel. How was town? Interesting, Sarah said, her voice sounding strange even to herself. Jake, I need to ask you something, and I want you to tell me the truth. Something in her tone made Jake stop smiling. He looked at her carefully, and Sarah saw a flicker of fear in his eyes. Of course, he said slowly. What do you want to know? Sarah pulled the newspaper from behind her back and held it up so Jake could see the front page. The color drained from his face instantly. For a long moment, they just stared at each other in complete silence. I can explain, Jake said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. Explain what? Sarah's voice was getting louder. Explain how you've been lying to me for 3 weeks? Explain how you're actually a millionaire CEO instead of a poor ranch hand? Explain how you let me take care of you and worry about you while your family thinks you're dead. Jake reached out toward her, but Sarah stepped back. Sarah, please listen to me. Listen to more lies. Sarah threw the newspaper on the kitchen table. Is your name even really Jake? Yes, my name is Jake, he said desperately. Jake Harrison, and everything I told you about my feelings for you is true. How can I believe anything you say? Sarah felt tears starting to fall down her cheeks. I don't even know who you are. The man I fell in love with doesn't exist. Jake ran his hands through his hair, looking more lost than she had ever seen him. I never meant for this to happen. When I woke up in your cabin, I saw a chance to be someone different, someone normal. I was so tired of my real life, the pressure, the expectations, everyone wanting something from me. Being here with you, being just Jake the Cowboy, was the first time I felt free in years. So I was what, an experiment? Sarah's voice was bitter. A way for you to play house and pretend to be poor? No, Jake said firmly. You were never an experiment. You saved my life, and then you gave me the best weeks I've ever had. Everything between us was real. How can it be real when it's all based on lies? Sarah wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Do you have any idea what this feels like? I told you things I've never told anyone. I let myself fall in love with you. And the whole time you were laughing at me. I was never laughing at you, Jake said, his own eyes filling with tears. I love you, Sarah. That's the only thing that's completely true in all of this mess. Sarah shook her head. I don't know what's true anymore. The Jake I love is kind and simple and honest. But you're not any of those things, are you? You're rich and powerful, and you lie as easily as breathing. Jake looked like she had slapped him. I'm the same person who chopped your wood and fixed your roof and held you while you talked about your dreams. Being rich doesn't change who I am inside. Doesn't it? Sarah challenged. Rich people live in a different world. They have different problems, different values, different lives. You probably have a mansion somewhere and servants and a life I could never understand. I don't want that life anymore, Jake said quietly. I want this life. I want you. Sarah felt her heart breaking all over again. Part of her wanted to believe him, wanted to run into his arms and forgive everything. But how could she trust someone who had deceived her so completely? I think you should leave, she said, her voice barely audible. Jake looked stunned. Sarah, please, don't do this. Let me explain everything. Let me tell you why I did what I did. There's nothing to explain, Sarah said, forcing herself to look strong even though she felt like she was dying inside. You're not who I thought you were. This whole thing has been a lie. I need you to go back to your real life and let me get back to mine. Jake stood there for a long moment, looking at her with such pain in his eyes that Sarah almost changed her mind. But then she remembered the newspaper article, the lies, the deception, and she held firm. If that's what you really want, Jake said finally. But Sarah, I need you to know that falling in love with you was the most real thing that's ever happened to me. Sarah turned away so he couldn't see her crying. She heard him gather his few belongings, heard him walk to the door, heard him pause as if he wanted to say something else. But finally, she heard the door close softly behind him. When Sarah was sure he was gone, she collapsed on the couch and cried harder than she had ever cried in her life. The cabin felt empty and cold without him. Everything reminded her of Jake, the fixed faucet, the chopped wood, the garden they had planted together. She had lost the love of her life, but worse than that, she had learned that the love of her life had never really existed at all. 2 weeks passed like a bad dream for Sarah. Every morning she woke up hoping Jake would be in the kitchen making coffee like he used to. Every evening she came home to an empty cabin that felt more lonely than it ever had before. The silence was terrible. No more laughter, no more stories by the fireplace, no more warm arms to hold her when she was sad. Sarah tried to go back to her old routine, but nothing felt the same. Her morning walks through the woods were painful because she kept looking for signs of Jake. The couch where they used to sit together made her cry. Even the garden they had planted together reminded her of what she had lost. She had trouble sleeping and barely ate anything. Her co-workers at the hospital noticed that she looked tired and sad, but Sarah didn't want to talk about it. The worst part was that Sarah missed Jake terribly, even though she was still angry about his lies. She found herself wondering what he was doing, if he was thinking about her, if he regretted the way things had ended. Sometimes she almost called the phone number from the newspaper article, just to hear his voice. But then she would remember how betrayed she felt, and she would put her phone away. On a rainy Tuesday afternoon, Sarah was surprised to hear a knock on her door. When she opened it, she found a young woman with dark hair and kind eyes, holding an umbrella and looking nervous. "Are you Sarah Martinez?" the woman asked politely. "Yes," Sarah replied, wondering who this stranger could be. "My name is Emma Harrison," the woman said. "I'm Jake's sister. Could I please come in? I'd like to talk to you about my brother." Sarah's heart started beating faster at the mention of Jake's name. She hesitated for a moment, then stepped aside to let Emma in. The woman was well dressed but not fancy, and she had the same warm brown eyes as Jake. "I'm sorry to bother you," Emma said as they sat down in Sarah's living room. "But I had to come thank you for what you did for Jake. You saved his life." "Told you what happened?" Sarah asked, surprised. Emma nodded. "He told our whole family. We were so worried when he disappeared. We thought he might be dead. When he came home 2 weeks ago, we were just grateful he was alive. But then we learned about you, and we realized you gave him much more than medical care." Sarah didn't know what to say. She had been so focused on feeling hurt and angry that she hadn't thought much about Jake's family and how worried they must have been. "Jake was in a very dark place before his accident," Emma continued. "He was depressed and overwhelmed by running our father's company. He felt trapped by money and expectations. We were all worried about him, but we didn't know how to help." "Why are you telling me this?" Sarah asked quietly. "Because when Jake came home, he was different," Emma said with a small smile. "He was happier and more peaceful than I'd seen him in years. He told us about falling in love with a wonderful nurse who lived in a cabin in the woods. He said you made him remember what really mattered in life." Sarah felt tears coming to her eyes. "Then why did he lie to me about everything?" Emma sighed. "My brother has always been afraid that people only like him for his money. He's been hurt before by women who pretended to love him but really just wanted his wealth. When he woke up in your cabin and saw how you cared for him without knowing who he was, he felt like he could finally be himself. He was wrong to lie, but his feelings for you were completely real." "It doesn't matter now," Sarah said sadly. "Too much has happened. I can't trust him anymore." "That's actually the other reason I came," Emma said, reaching into her purse. "Jake asked me to give you this." She handed Sarah a thick envelope. Sarah opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a letter from Jake and what looked like legal documents. She read the letter first, her heart pounding with every word. "My dearest Sarah," the letter began. "I know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness, but I need you to understand something. The weeks I spent with you were the most honest and real of my entire life. Yes, I lied about my name and my job, but everything else was true. My love for you, my dreams of a simple life, my desire to help people, all of that came from my heart. Made a decision that I hope will show you how serious I am about changing my life. I have stepped down as CEO of Harrison Industries. I am selling most of my shares in the company and using the money to start a foundation that builds medical clinics in rural areas where people can't easily get to hospitals. The first clinic will be built right here in your area, and I want you to run it. I've included all the legal papers that show the money has been set aside for this project. Whether you ever forgive me or not, your dream of helping people in underserved areas is going to come true. I bought a small ranch about 10 miles from your cabin. I'm going to raise horses and live the simple life I pretended to live with you, but it won't mean anything if you're not part of it. I love you, Sarah, and I'm willing to spend the rest of my life proving that to you if you'll give me the chance." Sarah's hands were shaking as she finished reading. She looked at the legal documents, which showed that Jake had indeed set up a foundation with millions of dollars to build rural medical clinics. The first clinic was planned for her town, with Sarah named as the director. "He really did all this?" Sarah asked Emma in amazement. "He signed the papers yesterday," Emma confirmed. "Jake has never been happier than when he was talking about your dreams and figuring out how to make them come true. He loves you so much, Sarah. I've never seen my brother like this before." That evening, after Emma left, Sarah sat on her porch thinking about everything she had learned. Jake had given up his corporate life and millions of dollars to prove that his love was real. He wanted to build her dream clinic and live the simple life he had claimed to want. But could she really trust him after all the lies? As the sun was setting, Sarah saw a familiar figure walking up the path to her cabin. It was Jake, looking nervous and hopeful. He was wearing simple jeans and a flannel shirt, just like the first day she had found him. But this time, she knew exactly who he was. "I know you asked me to leave," Jake said when he reached her porch. "But I had to try one more time. I've given up everything that was fake in my life. The company, the money, the pressure, it's all gone. The only thing I want to keep is my love for you." Sarah looked at him for a long moment. She could see the sincerity in his eyes, the same kindness that had made her fall in love with him in the first place. "How do I know you won't lie to me again?" she asked. "Because I have nothing left to hide," Jake said simply. "I'm just a man who wants to raise horses and love you for the rest of his life. I bought a ranch down the road, and I'm going to live there whether you take me back or not. But I'm hoping that maybe someday you might consider sharing it with me." Sarah stood up slowly and walked to where Jake was standing. She looked into his eyes and saw the same man who had chopped her wood and fixed her roof and held her by the fireplace. The money and the lies didn't change the heart of who he was. "The Jake I fell in love with was kind and honest and wanted to help people," Sarah said softly. "Are you that Jake?" "I'm trying to be," Jake replied. "Every day I'm trying to be the man you made me want to become." Sarah reached up and touched his face gently. "Then maybe we can start over. No more lies, no more secrets. Just Jake and Sarah figuring out how to build a life together." Jake pulled her into his arms and kissed her like she was the most precious thing in the world. "I love you, Sarah Martinez," he whispered. "The real me loves the real you, and nothing will ever change that." As they held each other under the stars, Sarah realized that sometimes love really could conquer everything. Even lies, even broken trust, even the pain of betrayal. The wounded cowboy she had found in the woods had indeed been a millionaire, but more importantly, he had become the love of her life. 6 months later, Sarah was running the new medical clinic that Jake's foundation had built, helping people in their rural community get the health care they needed. And every evening she went home to the ranch she shared with Jake, where they raised horses and lived the simple, honest life they had both always dreamed of.